For being here today. I am pleased to be joined today by DEA Administrator Ann Milgram to shine a light on one of the most significant threats to the public safety and the health in this country: fatal drug overdoses. The top priority of the Department of Justice is to protect the American people. And that means we have an obligation to make Americans aware of the deadly threat from counterfeit pills. Counterfeit pills containing deadly doses of illicit fentanyl. And we also have a responsibility to do all we can working with our law enforcement partners to stop it. So today, we're here to let the American people know that one pill can kill. And we're here to announce that this week, the women and men of the Drug Enforcement Administration, working with their state and local counterparts in law enforcement, in a series of coordinated actions across the country, seized more than 1.8 million counterfeit pills. Now, seizures like this alone will not solve this problem. We also need the public to understand the dangers posed by counterfeit pills. Last year, more than 93,000 people died of drug overdoses in the United States. This was the largest number of drug-related deaths ever recorded in a single year, and that's up 30% from last year. These are shocking figures. And as the map shows that we're displaying now, from small towns to suburbs to rural counties, no place is immune. No place in this country is immune from the overdose deaths that are plaguing this nation. Now, we know that opioids were responsible for almost 75% of the overdose deaths in 2020. And the primary driver of those deaths was illicit fentanyl, the synthetic opioid that is most commonly found in counterfeit pills. Now, in recent years, we have seen an alarming increase in the number of counterfeit pills containing illicit fentanyl. And when we say counterfeit pills, I want to be very clear, we mean pills that are fashioned to look like legitimate pills that might be prescribed by your doctor. But in fact, they are fake pills. They're being manufactured in illegal labs, many cases in Mexico, and they are not, I stress, they are not legitimate medications. Increasingly, they contain deadly doses of fentanyl and also methamphetamine. Counterfeit pills have been identified in every state in this country. They're being sold in inner cities, suburbs, and rural communities. They're being sold over the internet and on social media platforms like Facebook Marketplace or Snapchat, and they're being marketed to teenagers. The pervasiveness of synthetic opioids, the low cost, and the way criminal drug networks disguise them as legitimate prescription pills really can make them particularly dangerous to public safety. Now, to tackle this problem, we need a public awareness campaign to bring this message to every community and into every household. And we also need aggressive enforcement. That's why, earlier this week, DEA Administrator Milgram issued a public safety alert about the dangers of counterfeit pills. Now, the last time the DEA issued a public safety alert like this one was in 2015. And the reason we thought it was so important to issue this alert now is because DEA and its law enforcement partners are seizing deadly fake pills at an alarming rate. More than 9.5 million counterfeit pills were seized so far this year. That's more than the last 2 years combined. The number of fake pills with fentanyl has jumped nearly 430% since 2019. And DEA is finding that when it seizes counterfeit pills, they contain more than 2 milligrams of fentanyl, which is considered a deadly dose. And just to put that in perspective, that is the size that could fit on the tip of a pen. That's all it takes. And in 2017, again, to put this in perspective, 1 in 10 counterfeit pills contained a potentially deadly dose of fentanyl. Today, that number is 4 in 10. That's 4 in 10 counterfeit pills containing a potentially deadly dose of fentanyl. And so that's why we launched the One Pill Can Kill campaign. And over the coming weeks and months, we will be pushing this message into communities, into classrooms, into households throughout this country. And we'll be doing so throughout the holiday season as well, because we know that's when prescription drug use and misuse can rise. Because One Pill Can Kill, DEA field divisions across the country took coordinated enforcement actions and have seized more than 1.8 million counterfeit pills in just this operation alone. And this is truly a nationwide effort. Over the past 8 weeks, 89 DEA offices from coast to coast have conducted enforcement operations resulting in arrests to combat the counterfeit pill surge. Now, the DEA administrator will talk about this in more detail, but a very common fact pattern that we are seeing in these enforcement actions is that counterfeit pills that have been brought into the United States have been illegally produced in Mexico using precursor chemicals supplied by Chinese companies. Now, we will be working closely with Mexico to seek assistance to close these labs, and we call on China to work with us to help stop the misuse of precursor chemicals for criminal purposes. Now, I want to thank Administrator Milgram for her leadership at the DEA and for her leadership of this effort, and I'm going to turn it over to her now to provide more details about these operations. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Attorney General Monaco. I was sworn in as DEA Administrator just over 3 months ago. Within weeks of starting my job, I began to see a pattern in the daily briefing materials and press clips that I receive. Almost daily, I learned of an overdose death connected to fentanyl, most often from a deadly, fake, counterfeit pill. So I asked our principal deputy at DEA, Lou Million, to work closely with our Special Operations Division and our field divisions to target this alarming and pervasive increase in fentanyl-laced counterfeit pills that we were seeing throughout the United States. While many communities have separately noted a surge in overdose deaths or in drug-related violence, my first weeks on the job showed me that this is not only a local issue, it is also a national one. DEA's mission is to protect our communities by combating the criminal drug networks that are flooding every corner of the United States of America with deadly fentanyl. But our work is also about something more, helping the many families across America that we know are mourning the loss of a loved one due to an overdose death. A son or a daughter, a mother or father, a sister or brother, a friend or a neighbor. We want to do everything that we can from stopping the next overdose or overdose death from happening. And that is why we began a nationwide public safety surge beginning in early August to address what we see as an alarming rise of fake counterfeit pills that are being mass-produced by the criminal drug cartels in Mexico to look, as the Deputy Attorney General mentioned, just like real prescription pills, like OxyContin, Vicodin, Percocet, Xanax, and other medicines. As the DAG noted, before the surge, we had already seized a record 9.5 million counterfeit pills this year. And that number was higher than the prior 2 years combined. And as the Deputy Attorney General also noted, we've never seen a lethality rate that's higher. Fully 4 in 10, more than 4 in 10 pills that we seize contain deadly doses of fentanyl. In the last 8 weeks, this public safety surge has taken place in every single DEA field division throughout the United States. We've launched nearly 100 investigations. We've executed more than 60 search warrants. We've done this all in partnership with our state, local, and federal partners in law enforcement. And we've had special agents from every single DEA office throughout the United States working on this critical issue. And the results of our work show what a critical and urgent problem this truly is. There were 810 arrests made beginning August 3rd through this past Tuesday. We've seized 158 weapons and 1.8 million potentially deadly fentanyl pills. This was in urban, rural, and suburban parts of the United States, and there are felony charges pending in both state and federal courts for the arrestees that relate to crimes such as drug trafficking, drug distribution, and felony possession of a gun in furtherance of drug trafficking. In addition to the 1.8 million fentanyl-laced pills that were seized over this 2-month surge, we also seized 712 kilos of powder fentanyl. We also seized methamphetamine at very high rates, cocaine, cash, and other drugs. It's critical to understand that the fentanyl and the fentanyl-laced counterfeit pills that we seized in this surge are being mass-produced in Mexico by the Sinaloa and the CJNG drug cartels. These are the criminal organizations that we believe are responsible for producing the drugs that are flooding our streets. These pills are being sold on social media, on Snapchat, on Instagram, on e-commerce sites, on the dark web, and on the street. They are made to look nearly identical to real prescription pills. Their color, their size, their markings are virtually identical to what a real prescription pill would look like. But these are not real pills. What we see is that these pills are being purchased with cash and with cryptocurrency. In short, the criminal drug networks in both Mexico and in the United States are mass producing and pushing these deadly pills at record rates to Americans by any means possible. Many of these investigations began with overdose deaths. At least 9 overdose deaths are being investigated as part of this work. Many also began with violence. The DEA and our local, state, and federal law enforcement partners seized 158 guns as part of this 2-month surge: rifles, shotguns, handguns. And here are just a few examples of the cases and the investigations that are ongoing. In one southeastern state, the investigation was triggered by an overdose death that led DEA to uncover fake Xanax pills being sold on the dark web with cryptocurrency. Those pills were actually fentanyl that led to the overdose. In a southwestern state, in a community that is besieged by violent drug gangs, murders, and shootings, we found that there were fake Xanax pills meant to look like Xanax that were actually fentanyl, and we seized a number of pills and weapons. In a western state, an overdose death led authorities to drug traffickers on Snapchat selling fentanyl pills yet again that were disguised to look like Xanax. There were also multiple weapons that were seized, along with large quantities of fentanyl powder and fentanyl pills. In a northwestern state, an overdose death led to investigators to look into social media sales on Snapchat by drug traffickers that are linked to a number of murders, to fentanyl-laced fake pills that are purporting to be OxyContin, to fentanyl powder, to methamphetamine, and to numerous weapons. To put it simply, in 8 weeks, the DEA and our partners have seized enough fentanyl-laced pills to kill 700,000 Americans. We also seized enough fentanyl powder that even using a conservative estimate, that amount of powder, 712 kilograms, could be turned into tens of millions of deadly doses of fentanyl. As Deputy Attorney General Monaco stated, fatal drug overdoses are plaguing our nation. This visual, the Deputy Attorney General showed you the overdose hot spots, and this map is created by the Baltimore-Washington HIDA. It's called OD Maps, and it's put out regularly to show law enforcement where overdose deaths are occurring. Those are the yellow markings on the map. The red dots, the red points, are the points where our enforcement actions took place during the past 2 months. So you can see that we are strategic in focusing our enforcement efforts on the areas of the greatest harm in the United States of America, and will continue to do so. DEA is and will continue to relentlessly pursue those traffickers that are driving this national overdose crisis and that are also driving much of the violence in our communities. We cannot stress enough the danger of these counterfeit pills, of these substances. We're seeing these pills being illegally sold in every state in the United States. They are cheap, they are widely available, they can be purchased online and on social media, so through people's phones, and they're extremely dangerous. And I cannot emphasize enough that the only pill that someone should take is the pill that has been personally prescribed to you and filled at a legitimate pharmacy. You shouldn't take a pill from a family member, a friend, a colleague, or a neighbor. I'm so deeply grateful to the men and women of the DEA across the United States and across the world who work tirelessly to protect our communities. I'm also grateful to the Deputy Attorney General for her support of this critical work. This is a national emergency, and this is just the start of the work that the DEA will do to address it. Thank you.
I have two. I have one is on topic, and probably for the administrator. So, you mentioned that a lot of this is coming from Mexico and is being made in Mexico and sent here, and with tensions being as strained with that country as they are right now, particularly after they passed a law last year sort of limiting DEA's work in that country. I'm wondering how you think that would impact your ability to crack down on this type of thing. And then my second question is for the Deputy Attorney General, and it is regarding Huawei. With the CEO going back to China last week, and then China sending back the 2 Canadians, and then the American siblings also being allowed to leave. Do you think that this emboldens China to detain other Americans in future disputes?
Sure. On Mexico, I see my obligation and DEA's mission to do everything we can to target and dismantle the serious criminal networks abroad and in the United States that are trafficking in dangerous drugs, and they're harming our communities through overdoses and violence. As we said, there's no question in my mind that the vast majority of chemicals are coming from China and going to Mexico and being mass produced into fentanyl, into methamphetamine, and increasingly into the counterfeit pills that we see on our streets. So it has never been more critical that we work to stop these drugs at the source that they're being created, whether that's China or that's Mexico. So from my vantage point, we have to work tirelessly to do that. I had the opportunity yesterday to sit with the Mexican Attorney General. I was frank in expressing to him my concerns about what we are seeing in the United States, that this is a public safety crisis that we're facing, and that it's being driven by these mass-produced fentanyl and methamphetamines that are coming from Mexico. We had a good dialogue about ways in which our countries can cooperate and work together to stop the flow of drugs, and I'm optimistic, and I hope that we will be able to forge that path going forward.
Thanks, Eddie, for your question. I think what I would just say on that is that the United States has and will continue to call out and condemn the use of arbitrary detention and unlawful detentions by countries, and think that is a practice that all nations should condemn. Thank you.
How difficult, this is for, I guess, both. My first question, how difficult is this current crisis and surge on the southern border? I know you met with someone from Mexico, the Attorney General, yesterday from Mexico, but how difficult does this make your job that we're seeing an increased number of people coming, and we're going to be seeing even more people coming over the next few months? I mean, is it coming across? We know it's coming across. How difficult does that make your job? And then the second question is, are we seeing things in Tylenol, Advil, or is this just prescription drugs, or is it getting that sophisticated?
Well, I'll start, and Administrator can add. Look, I think what we've seen is that the issue we're here talking about today, illicit fentanyl, coming across the border, coming from Mexico, is something that we have seen increasing year over year over year, over many years, regardless of what the situation is at the border. And we're here today to call that out and to tell people, to frankly implore them to watch out for this danger, watch out for this danger on behalf of their kids. I don't know, Anne, if you'd like to add.
The drug cartels are a $500 billion business, and they try their best to get narcotics to flood our streets with dangerous drugs like fentanyl and methamphetamine, and they do it through whatever way they can, whether it's the border, the ports, by air, by mail. We have seen every single way that the cartels will work to get those drugs here, and I think it's really important to understand that that is what we are facing. And as the Deputy Administrator has said, since 2015, we have seen year upon year significant increases in the amount of fentanyl coming into our country. I would just say one of the things that concerns me the most about this is that unlike plant-based drugs, we're talking about something that's synthetic, that's man-made in a factory. And so there's almost no limit on the amount and quantities that can be produced. If there are chemicals coming from China to Mexico, there's the ability to mass produce massive quantities of incredibly deadly narcotic drugs. And so we have to do everything we can to stop these organizations from being able to source, manufacture, and distribute those drugs.
Are you seeing like Tylenol, Advil?
Thank you for reminding me.
those
No,
types of-
we have not seen, so I think a couple things. One is that the prescription chain has not been impacted. So it's really important to understand that when we talk about one pill can kill, we are not talking about legitimate pharmaceutical pills. This is one reason why what we see the criminal drug networks doing, why it's so predatory, because they are manufacturing pills, they are marketing them, they are pushing them as though they were the real thing, and they're not. They're deadly fentanyl and methamphetamine. Those are not being offered, they're not being prescribed by a legitimate doctor, they're not being filled in a pharmacy. So any prescription that you have legitimately gotten from your doctor that is filled at your pharmacy is fine. We have not seen an impact of fentanyl in other substances that are lawful substances like Tylenol or Advil. I will note we have seen fentanyl lacing things like cocaine and methamphetamine. And so we are very much watching for that, and we do a number of investigations around that type of fentanyl lacing other drugs.
Can you talk about the what efforts, or if you were having any conversations with the social media companies? You mentioned some of them are the other marketplaces where these drugs are being sold, and what are you hearing from those companies as far as an effort to try to stem the flow of those drugs?
I have not spoken to any of the social media companies yet. I would be very clear in saying that of these almost 100 investigations, that a significant number of them relate to drug trafficking on social media sites like Snapchat, like Instagram, and that there's no question in my mind that those sites need to do more. If we know that there's drug dealing happening on their sites every single day, they know that too. And so this conversation is a very serious one. The social media companies need to take much greater responsibility, in my view. And also parents, families, people need to understand the dangers that lurk on these sites. The fact that drug dealers right now, and we see this every single day, are operating with what seems like impunity on those social media sites.
First, for the administrator, how would you characterize the current relationship between DEA and your counterparts in Mexico right now? And then secondarily, for the DAG, yesterday we saw the arrest of a warden at a federal prison in California, the latest example of serious misconduct within the Bureau of Prisons. How do you plan to address the misconduct within the BOP to ensure the safety of the about 150,000 inmates in the DOJ's custody? And given the number of incidents in the Bureau of Prisons in the last year and a half, do you have confidence in Director Carvajal?
I'll start and then turn it over to the administrator. First, without getting into any specific case, Mike, as I'm sure you can appreciate, what I would say is whenever somebody abuses a position of trust, and whenever that abuse of that position of trust particularly happens with somebody in their care, that is something that is unacceptable, and we need to do everything we can, and we are committed to doing everything we can to hold those people accountable. So I'll say that broadly, again, without speaking about a particular case. With regard to the Bureau of Prisons, more broadly, as I think you know, I'm taking a very serious look at these issues across the board. And Director Carvajal, I've had many discussions with him. I do have confidence in his leadership because he and I are completely aligned on the following, which is the Bureau of Prisons really has two missions, and it's a twofold mission. One is the safe, secure, humane custody and detention of individuals. And the second is doing everything we can to properly prepare individuals for a return to society. And in instances like with the MCC in New York, where I have personally toured and gone to see for myself, where I have seen that those missions, that twofold mission is not being carried out, I've taken steps to address it, in that instance, directing the closure of the MCC. And it's that same approach that I will take going forward with other issues. Thanks.
I would be very clear in saying that people are dying in the United States of America. They're dying from drug overdose deaths. They're dying from increased violence surrounding drug trafficking. What the United States has asked, what I have asked the Mexican Attorney General, is for us to be able to engage in law enforcement activity in partnership with Mexican law enforcement, that Mexico will take seriously extraditions and will honor extradition requests, that we get access to illicit financing information and other critical evidence that we need when we conduct investigations into organized crime. And these things are essential for the United States to be able to protect the safety and security of our people.
Thank you.
Thank you.